So today's lesson isn't going to be on a particular trick or a move. It's going to be on a concept that is infinitely important in your progression through Magic, and that is misdirection, or the rather aptly titled direction. Now, one of the many theories on misdirection that I particularly subscribe to is one by a magician named Tommy Wonder. If you're unfamiliar with his works, Tommy Wonder was a phenomenal magician in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even up till his death in the 2000s. He was a phenomenal magician. He did a lot of good stuff with cards. He was very out there in terms of his methods. His methods often involved having apparati all over his body just to accomplish a trick. So he was the definition of the adage that the method does not matter, the effect is all that matters. He was definitely the person that cared about that the most. But he had this concept of misdirection, which I have used and I've subscribed to pretty much my entire magical life, and that is the concept of direction. Now, misdirection implies that you are misleading the spectator or you are being deceitful to the spectator, whereas the concept of direction is more fruitful and more relevant to the concept and the overall ideas, because you are not misdirecting the spectator. You're not being mischievous. You're not being deceitful. You are, in fact, directing the spectator to the attention where you want it. So if you want the spectator's attention on a deck, you put the attention on a deck. You convey it with your body language. You convey it with your language. You convey it with your demeanor, your stance, your posture. If you want that attention on the deck, you are directing the attention from the deck. Now, you could say, in fact, that by directing my attention on the deck, I am leading you away from attention on my other hand, right? So, for example, if I palm a card and I put attention on this particular deck, I'm directing your attention and I'm directing all the energy that you have and all the energy that I have on this deck as to avoid this sort of thing being caught. So it's not necessarily a test in misdirection. It's a test in direction of focus. You are directing focus in different spots, and you're directing focus in spots that you are controlling yourself. That is the measure of a good magician and a great magician. When you're a great magician, you're able to direct attention exactly where you want it. Even a spectator that's a little bit difficult and a little bit harsh, you're able to direct their attention exactly where you need it to be. So that's the first starting iteration and the first sort of theory on misdirection that I want you guys to kind of understand. Use direction. You are directing the spectator's attention where you want it. If it just so happens to be that they are not looking at something else and they're not paying attention to something else, then so be it. But the attention is what matters, and you are directing their attention and controlling it. So that is the first little thing. The next concept is something that I've picked up over the many years of doing Magic, and that is that there are a couple different types of direction and misdirection, if you want to call it that. Now, I've boiled it down to just two main types of direction or misdirection, if you want to call it that. I refer to one as physical misdirection and another one as psychological misdirection. Now, let's talk a little bit about physical misdirection. Physical misdirection involves your body. It involves your posture. It involves your physicality to draw attention somewhere that you need it to be. So, for example, let's say you are holding a coin in your right hand. You're transferring it to your left hand. All my body posture, my whole demeanor, my whole attention is focused on this particular hand. Again, that is to draw attention away from the other hand, which is hiding the coin. But imagine if my attention was focused on something else, then the illusion wouldn't be as strong. So you need to be able to believe almost in what you're doing. So if you place an object from the right hand into the left hand, you need to convince yourself that the object is there. Because by doing that, you're going to be able to appeal to the spectator's subconscious. You're going to be able to appeal to the spectator's natural social cues, where they're going to say, oh, okay, so he's placed an object in his hand. Your whole body language has to convey that idea. So if you just did this and your body language is awkward and your body language is not the same as if it would be if you were to actually genuinely do the move, then you're not doing it right. So that's one of the things that you need to practice the most when practicing little sleights like this or practicing a false transfer. It's not just the actions and the mechanics of the move, is what is your body language saying? What is your posture saying? Are you awkward? Are you comfortable? Are you natural? Spectators pick up on these things more than magicians give them credit for. And as humans, we're able to pick up on social cues naturally because we're looking for patterns all the time. So if we see something that's different from the pattern, if we see something that's different from the norm, we're going to get attention to that. And oftentimes, what's different in Magic is exactly where the method lies. So in this case, if you are awkward or unnatural, there's only one other avenue where that ring could possibly be, and it's in this hand, which draws attention to the method. So you want to direct your entire physicality, your entire posture, your entire stance to the attention where you need it to be. And you want to make sure that it's a natural thing. So, I mean, just look at the difference between me doing this, right, and this awkward gesture, or me having just the attention, my focus, my body, my stance is all focused on this particular hand until the coin happens to disappear. There it is. So it's just an attention of physicality. It's your body language, it's your posture. So these are all things that I don't think beginner magicians pay attention to because they're just focused on the method. They're focused on getting from point A to point B. But between point A and point B, there's so much that needs to be taken in consideration before you're ready to perform. So you need to start thinking of your body language. You need to start thinking of what you're saying, how you're saying it. And those are things that are little touches that could add a huge difference to your magic. The next type of misdirection is psychological misdirection. Now, this one involves time misdirection. This one involves language. This one involves things that you can't see. So it's not body language. It's not posture. It's misdirection in the air of invisibility, meaning that you can't see it. It's not there physically. However, it is there mentally. So again, I mentioned time misdirection because that's one of my favorite uses of psychological misdirection. Now, when it comes to this, time misdirection or time direction is when you are taking time away and focusing from something else to a conversation. You're focusing on something else to draw attention away from something. So if you're doing, for example, crosscut force, right? If you're doing crosscut force and the spectators cut the cards, you've put the deck staggered in that position. You want to draw attention away from the cards for a little bit of time. The reason for this is because when a spectator's attention is drawn back on the situation, they don't remember exactly how we got to the situation. So you could very cleanly show this card to the spectator and tell them to remember it as if that's the card they cut to, when in reality, if we look moments before, that card was on the bottom of the deck. I don't know why that card's face up, but that card was the original bottom card of the deck. So that's just a little exercise in time misdirection. This is one of my favorite uses because by employing a little bit of time misdirection in your routines, you're going to be astonished at the things you could get away with. Now, time misdirection is one of my favorite techniques in Magic because of its strength. You're able to apply the direction exactly when you need, and you're able to draw attention away from a certain object, which needs just a little bit of time, a little bit of focus away from it, so the spectators misremember aspects of it that you take great advantage of. And there's no better example of this than a crosscut force. Another psychological direction technique, and one that is probably the most important, is your language. Your language is something that the spectators are going to remember. And by saying certain things sporadically throughout your performance, you're going to have the spectator remember to those certain words, remember those certain little things that you've mentioned, and that's what they're going to recall as what happened in the trick. Imagine you have a trick where the spectator peeks at a card. They peek at any card they want. You ask them if they could shuffle the cards. You give them the deck. They hand it back to you, but you say, no, I don't want to touch the cards. Keep shuffling the cards because later on you're going to say, oh, maybe I control the card in a way. I just want to make sure that the deck is completely shuffled. Okay, perfect. I haven't touched the deck, right? You're just thinking of a card. Beautiful. All right, say that card over and over in your head. All right, and then you say the card. By using simple language like that, what the spectator is going to remember is that they were thinking of a card and you never touched the deck. In reality, you touched the deck because you had them peek at a card. But using little things like that make a huge difference later on. I keep using the example of a couple times when I've performed card on ceiling. Card on ceiling, if you guys don't know, it's the spectators picking a card in the deck. They sign it. That card gets lost in a deck. Sometimes there's a rubber band wrapped around it. The deck is then subsequently thrown at the ceiling. It comes down and one card sticks, and it happens to be the spectator's signed selection. Now, in my initial doing of this trick, I wouldn't really pay attention to what I would say. I just pretend like I was angry at the cards and I'm angry that I wouldn't be able to find the card, so I'd throw the deck in the air or in the ceiling in anger, and then that one card would stick, and that was the end of the trick. And it was very interesting because after the fact, people would recall the trick and tell the trick to the other friends and say, wow, you need to see this trick. This guy's crazy. I signed a card and it ended up on the ceiling. He never touched the ceiling. He was never anywhere near the ceiling, and that signed card ended up in the ceiling. Same thing with a shoe trick that I used to do. So the card would end up in my shoe, and people would swear that it was a signed card, that I never touched the deck, and the card ended up in their shoe. So you have little things like that that are based on language. And oftentimes we don't think about the things we say. We just say it because we're in the moment, we're caught up in the heat. And those are the things that mean the most, because by doing these simple things, you're able to have the spectator almost direct themselves into believing that they saw a trick that is impossible. So a card on ceiling where you throw the deck at the ceiling turns into the card appeared on the ceiling. A trick where you have the spectator pick a card and that card ends up in your shoe could turn into a signed card ended up in their shoe. You have all these little things that all you need to do is just change the language and emphasize certain things and not emphasize other things. And you have a miracle in your hands. You have an impossibility that the spectator is going to remember and tell other people and create this legend that truly never happened, but was based entirely on the language and the words you chose. Little ways that you could employ this in your tricks are, for example, let's say you've controlled a card to the top of the deck, the spectators picked it, doesn't matter, they're holding on to the deck. You could say at this point, okay, I want you to hold on to the deck. Remember, I don't want to touch anything. I don't want to touch anything, but do me a favor, name any number between 1 and 52. Okay, that's great. Deal that many cards face down into my left hand. Okay, and they do that, and you could get into the force that we talked about in a previous Patreon video. Now, again, by saying a little sentence like, I don't want to touch the deck, remember, I never touched the deck, you're implying that you never had control over the cards. And that's what the spectator is going to remember. They're going to remember those little tidbits. And it's those little touches that turn a trick from just an ordinary trick to an absolute miracle without you having to do much. All you need to do is just change your language. And you're directing the spectator to believe that certain things happened that are impossible. I hope you guys got something out of that little ramble to give you guys a little bit of a trick. Again, nothing complicated, nothing over the top, but it's just the language you use in a peek routine. As I mentioned earlier and as I alluded earlier, you can have the spectator peek at any card. I talk about peeks on the other part of the Patreon, so if you want to look at those videos, I talk a lot about peeks. This is my favorite one. It's not hard to do, so look at those videos if you want a little bit more detail on that. But you have the spectator peek at a card, right? In this case, 3 of diamonds, you close up the deck, you glimpse at the card, so you do the heel peek that I discussed in another video. If you want a little bit of detail on that, you just have a pinky break, you revolve the deck, and by naturally revolving the deck, that half is going to stagger and step towards the right, which is going to provide you just enough of an index for you to be able to peek at. So you just have the spectator call stop anytime they want. You say, don't forget that card. Can you shuffle the cards? And of course, in that action, I've done my glimpse. I know what the spectator's card is. They're mixing up the cards. Right? It's very important also beforehand, before you do the peek, that they've shuffled the cards. That's also very, very important. So after the fact, now you've glimpsed the card. They're shuffling the cards. They're holding the cards in their own hand. And they're going to give them back to you. They're going to attempt to give them back to you. You say, no, I don't want to touch them. Do me a favor, keep mixing them because I don't want you to think that I have some sort of overt control over the cards. And of course, the spectator is going to remember this point and say, no, I was holding the cards. I shuffled them. He never touched them. I don't want to touch the cards. Would it be impressive if I could run through the cards and find a card that you're thinking of? That would be impressive? Great. Would it be even more impressive if I could do it with the cards face down? Would that be impressive? Of course, the spectators are holding onto the cards. They're going to say, yes, that's very impressive. Would it be impressive if I could do it without even touching a deck? Look at me. Here's where you wait 3 seconds, look at them right in the face, and name the card that you peeked. Is a wonderful idea by Richard Osterlin, one that I employ all the time. But what do you get out of this? You get a trick where the spectator supposedly has thought of any card in the deck. That's one of the points that you emphasize. And that you never touched the deck. Another point that you're emphasizing. Remember, I don't want to touch the deck. I haven't touched the deck. You shuffled them. You mixed them. You're thinking of any card. You didn't pick a card. You're just thinking of one. You wait 3 seconds. You look them in the eyes and you name their card. Beautiful, beautiful touch by Richard Osterlin. It's a wonderful method, and it's direct, punchy, to the point. But what the spectators are going to remember is the most important part of the trick, and it's that psychological misdirection and a psychological direction in language and direction and focus where you want them to be that makes this little trick from a simple peeks at a card. They imagine the card over here. You tell them, imagine the card, send it to me, 6 of diamonds. Right? You go from a trick where usually that's how it looks like and that's the outcome to a trick where they're holding a deck. They swear that you haven't touched the cards and you were able to read their mind and tell them the card that they're thinking of. So all that by using language. Take advantage of that, guys. That's probably one of the most advantageous tips I'm going to give you in this entire lesson, in this entire series, because that could make miracles happen. So I hope you guys got something from that. I hope you guys learned something from that. And I'll see you guys on the next one.